Let's go ahead and get started with the UK rail story there. Now, I actually want to play a clip from Case Study QB first, because this is a clip that is discussing the state of workers in this country, but it's not just this country. This problem is happening globally. So I'm going to link this with the rail strike that's happening in the UK. But I want you to listen to what they say in this clip about workers. And you guys know, as I've told you before, we should not shame the workers. I 100% support the workers. I believe that workers should have the ability to go on strike. I believe that people should have a living wage in this country. And I believe that if people are not given a living wage, they should have the opportunity to say, no, I'm not going to work for you because you're not going to pay me enough. Unfortunately, the individuals on this panel don't necessarily feel that way. They are going to attempt to blame the workers. Let's go ahead and get into it. You got to hear this to believe it. Not getting around.
So we have an overheated labor market right now, and it's because of what the Fed did, but also, fiscal stimulus disincentivizing people from going back to work. And right now we're in this situation where employees have more leverage over employers than they ever have. And it's kind of counterproductive to capitalism. And I think over the course of the next several months, several quarters, the Fed is going to be forced to have to reset the labor market. They're going to have to reset equilibrium. Just a quick story. Took my kids skiing to the local ski resort in Cleveland over the weekend. They're trying to, at the ski resort, they're trying to hire high school kids to work concession stands for $20 an hour. And they can't get high school kids to take that job. I think I was working for $5 an hour in high school. Now, that was a long time ago.
So it's not just the wages, but it's also saying, I want to work from home. Yes. I don't want to come in 2 days a week. I want this. I want that.
So we have an overheated labor market right now, and it's because of what the Fed did, but also, fiscal stimulus disincentivizing people from going back to work. And
let's pause right there. We have an overheated labor market because of the fact of the stimulus, financial stimulus, and because it's encouraged people basically to not want to go back to work. Now, I wanted to play the clip by itself first, and then we're going to dive through. Because notice that he didn't mention anything about the pandemic. Not once. He mentions financial stimulus, but he doesn't tell you why there was financial stimulus, which, by the way, I received 2 stimulus checks. Did that stop me from working? No. That $1,200 and that $600 wasn't enough to make me say, I'm not going to work anymore. And I think that's the case for most Americans. So let's point that out. Sorry, but he's being unrealistic here. Not mentioning the fact that we also had a pandemic. And during that time, there were workers that were overexploited even more than they were before the pandemic, because they had employers that were making them work longer hours. They weren't giving people raises to save money. Some of these employers did not have PPE. We know the whole Amazon story in reference to that and Chris Smalls. So these workers were working longer hours and not being compensated for it in the way that they should have been. At the same time, you had some employees that were able to work from home. I was one of those people when the pandemic started. For some of us, once we started working from home, we didn't want to go back into the office. We didn't want to have to deal with the commute and the traffic and the cost of getting there. Even for those who take public transportation, you still have to pay to take the public transportation. So for some of us that were working from home, we got used to getting our life back. We were able to start dinner maybe right after we're done working and not have to go through 2 hours of traffic to get home and then try to rush and start dinner, have time to eat, and then just go to sleep. We got used to the fact that if we were working from home, hey, during my lunch break, I can throw in a load of laundry if I want to. We got time back with friends. We got time back with family. I had employees tell me they got time back with their kids. He doesn't mention any of that. He blames it all on the fact that people were given these stimulus checks. And when he says financial stimulus, he's probably also talking about the child tax credit as well, which was temporary. So that didn't even last the entire time. Notice how he leaves that out. Let's go on. And of course, they don't correct him.
Incentivizing people from going back to work. And right now we're in this situation where employees have more leverage over employers than they ever have.
What's wrong with that? Listen to the way he's framing these statements. Employees have more leverage over employers than they ever have before. I don't see a problem with that. Don't see a problem with people going on strike. I don't see a problem with employees trying to start a union and unionize. I don't see a problem with employees trying to start worker co-ops. I have no problem with that. He has a problem with that because he doesn't want the employees to have that type of power. Let's go on.
And it's kind of counterproductive to capitalism. And I think over the course of the next...
Counterproductive to capitalism. You see this? That's the problem that he has. Because you have to continue to support capital. And in order for that to happen, they need your labor. That's why he's upset. We must keep capitalism going. That's how he feels.
Several months, several quarters, the Fed is going to be forced to have to reset the labor market. They're going to.
That should bother everyone. The Fed is going to have to be forced to reset the labor market. What does he mean by that? Reset it how? What are they going to do? Make people go to work?
Have to reset equilibrium. Just a quick story.
Equilibrium. Okay.
Took my kids skiing to the local ski resort in Cleveland over the weekend.
This is the class issue. He took his kids skiing at the local ski resort over the weekend. You see how out of touch he is with the working class? How many of you can afford to take your kids skiing? He said kids, so there's plural, there's more than one child, and he probably also had to pay for himself as well. How many of you can afford to do that? How many of you own a pair of skis and ski gear? Because you have to have the jackets and the goggles and all of that. How many of you can afford to do this? Do you see how out of touch this is? The class divide. He's complaining because he took his kids skiing and he's complaining about the labor. Listen to this.
They're trying to, at the ski resort, they're trying to hire high school kids to work concession stands for $20 an hour. And they can't get high school kids to
they
take
don't want
that
to
job.
do it for 20.
I think I was working for $5 an hour in high school. That was a long.
See how people take their personal situation and try to apply it to the rest of the economy and the rest of Americans? He had a job when he was in high school when he was making $5 an hour, and he was totally fine with that. That was a long time ago. So he's upset because they're trying to get high school kids to work at the ski resort and pay them $20 an hour, and people don't want to do it. First of all, teenagers are not obligated to work. I had a job when I was in high school as well, but teenagers are not obligated to have a job. At that point in time, your job really should be going to school, focusing on your studies, hanging out with your friends, that kind of thing. But he's upset because he went to the ski resort and they don't have enough people to work at the concession stands. He doesn't even stop and think about the fact that the majority of Americans can't even afford to go to the ski resort. Do you guys see the problem? That's the class divide. Let's go on.
Time ago.
So it's not just the wages, but it's also saying, I want to work from home.
Yes.
I don't want to come in 2 days a week. I want this. I want that.
So we have an
What's wrong with that? There is nothing wrong with those things. If you have a job where you can do your work remotely, why can't you work from home? Why do you need to physically be in the office if you don't really need to be there? I say this to anybody, especially those of you that are software engineers. Those of you have jobs where you're just on your computer. Why do you need to physically be in the office? Some of these managers only want you there so they can keep an eye on you, so they can micromanage you, or because they don't trust their employees. They don't believe their employees are actually working when they're at home. If the work is getting done and they're still doing a good job, why does it matter if they are in the office or if they are working at home? Think about it, guys. Did you see the way that they were talking about the workers? Now, I want to connect this to the rail strike in the UK because that's still happening. But there has been an update because they're still on strike. They started the strike right before the holidays, and now, because of their efforts, almost no trains will run across England on Thursday as drivers strike. In the beginning, there were limitations here. So they said that some of the trains are not going to be able to run as constantly as they were before because of the strike. But now, almost no trains. Let's get into it. Now, this is from The Guardian. Solidarity again to the rail workers. Industrial action by ASLEF members will stop services on major national rail lines, halting commuter services. Almost no trains will run in most parts of England on Thursday as train drivers at 15 operating companies go on strike. The 24-hour strike by members of the ASLEF union will stop services entirely across major national rail lines, halting most commuter services in the Southeast, Midlands, and North of England. In most areas, the impact on the railway will exceed that of this week's industrial action by RMT members at Network Rail and train operators, who will start a second 48-hour strike on Friday. This is how you shut things down. This is why Joe Biden and the rest of Congress did not want the rail workers to go on strike in the US, not just because it affects the supply chain, but also because if they go on strike, then nothing's moving. These trains are not moving. Let's go on. No trains at all will run on Avinti West Coast, Chiltern, Cross Country, East Midlands, Govia Thameslink Railway, Great Northern, Thameslink, Southern and Gatwick Express services, Northern, Southeastern, Transpennine Express, and West Midland trains. Now, if any of you are in the UK and you're watching, you're in the chat, let me know. Because this is going to affect the commute. These are the commuter trains. So people who need to take the train to get to work, they're going to have to look for other options. Let's go on. Most services operated by ScotRail and Transport for Wales, whereas ASLEF has agreed pay deals, will run on Thursday, but intercity trains to Scotland and Wales from London will be severely limited. You guys know there's a lot of people in London. London is like the UK's New York City. So just keep that in mind. That would almost be like if all the subways, like the subway workers in New York City, went on strike. Imagine. Okay. ASLEF drivers have also settled disputes at Mersey Rail and in London and are not taking strike action at C2C. On Wednesday, the drivers' union dismissed as tokenism a pay offer reportedly being drawn up by the government ahead of its 6th day of coordinated strikes since the dispute started in early 2022. Mike Whelan, the general secretary of ASLEF, said that a possible £2,000 would increase would be accepted by drivers. Now, he told the Guardian inflation was running this year at 14%. We've received no pay raise for the previous 2 years, and they want industry reform for 3%. I don't think that will fly with my members. So I've been talking a good bit about the UK the past couple of months. Yes, their inflation, I think last time I talked about this, they were at 10%. It's now at 14%. So imagine having a 14% inflation and you're not receiving a raise. They said they haven't received a raise for 2 years. So what are they supposed to do? I don't blame them for going on strike. I told you the story about the heating issue in the UK, how some of the residents are having to go to warm banks. That's what they're calling these facilities, so that they can get heat because they can't afford to pay for the heat to heat their home. So something has to give. Let's go on. ASLEF's leadership is due to meet Rail Minister Hugh Merriman on Monday. Whelan said train drivers had been treated with contempt. We don't want to be on the picket lines. We don't want to be losing money. We don't want to be hurting the traveling public, but we've been given no alternative by the actions of the government and the industry. So you see, they have the government and the industry going against them. And again, they're not doing this to hurt the public, but they don't know what else to do at this point. The Department for Transport said passengers have rightly had enough of rail strikes and want the disruption to end. Unions should step back from this strike action so we can start 2023 by ending this damaging dispute. I want to highlight this piece right here. Damaging dispute. Do you see the rhetoric that is being used to talk about the strikes? Damaging, chaotic, disruptive. These are words that will give someone the impression that going on strike is bad. And it's not. This is a right that they have because they are a part of the union. About 20% of normal timetabled trains will run over the rest of the week, with thousands of members of the RMT striking for 48 hours again on Friday and Saturday, with disruption continuing into Sunday. No further strikes are planned, although RMT and ASLEF members recently voted to extend the mandate for industrial action for a further 6 months. And I don't know why this is here, but this was just saying that Elon Musk is no longer the richest person in the world. But I want you guys to see how they're starting to speak about the workers, how they're starting to speak about the strikes. I've seen other articles as well where people are being very negative towards these employees that are choosing to go on strikes now, because now people feel like, oh, it's too much. It's too many of them. Too many of them. We were okay with it when it was like 1 or 2. We were okay with it when it was just like Amazon, maybe when it was just like John Deere, Kellogg's. But now there's too many of them and it's gotten out of hand and we're not okay with it anymore. So we're going to start using negative vocabulary to make other people think that going on strike is bad. We have to have solidarity with the workers. So shout out to those of you in the UK that are on strike. I don't blame you. I don't blame you. Like I said, London is like the UK's New York City. So imagine if the subway workers in New York City decided to go on strike. You want to talk about shutting things down? When I lived in New York, I didn't know anyone who owned a car. I heavily relied on the subway. Most people in New York City do. Now, I'm not trying to put anything out there or anything and say maybe they should do this. I don't know their working conditions, but I'm just saying. Just putting a little bug out there. Shout out to M. Smith for the super chat. How long ago was that stimulus? So the last one that I received was over a year ago. It was over a year ago. Yeah. Anthony said, thanks for covering UK news. My sister always told me the UK is always 10 years behind the US. We follow you, which is why our society is going down the toilet. We will have private healthcare soon. I heard they were trying to privatize the healthcare system. Kitty says, I am proud of them for going on strike. They are an inspiration to us US workers. I am too. Shout out to you guys.